Now, last week, President Muhammadu Buhari signed the amendments of the new Companies and Allied Matters Act, CAMA 2020, into law. The law, which has been generating reactions among policymakers and business analysts, has been described in some quarters as a welcome development. But some school of thoughts maintain that there are a few contentions in this law. One of the thought leaders that holds this view is the Chief Executive Officer of Lichting Consulting and BudGov Limited, Dr. Maklesh Otwedun, who joins us now to share his views on the new CAMA laws. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us on the program this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashaju. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks a million. So what are your views of the amended CAMA law? It doesn't look like it's all gloom as some analysts believe.
No, I think it's, if you look at CAMA, a law that has been there since 1990, and the world has really moved fast and moved on, and having it amended, I think, is a plus. It's positive for the government.
A 30-year law, right?
Yeah, so kudos to the National Assembly and kudos to the executive also for working collaboratively to ensure that the Companies and Allied Matters Act 1990 it's repealed, and the Companies and Allied Matters Act 1919 enacted. And it's a sharing news. And also, if you look at some of the provisions of the new law, from a company's perspective, company law perspective, it has a lot of good news, and also is going to facilitate a lot of capital market activities, company registration activities. And so, if you look at it, some provisions there like one person now can be a shareholder in a company, which is very fantastic.
Right.
And now, prior to this time, your authorized capital, you actually have to pay for everything. So right now, you are paying for what you eat. So you have what they call minimum capital. So you only pay for what you are ready to use now, not what you intend to use tomorrow. And so then there's a whole lot of provisions now for e-filing, or the e-word now. So you have e-share transfer, e-filing, e-meetings. And so those are a lot of, then the issue of common seal has also been added. So right now, particularly for smaller entities, if you can use other medium now, so you don't really need.
So we know about all of these merits in the law, but you certainly have some contentions, even though we have brought you some of the regulators and policymakers to address some of these issues. You're concerned about Section 275 as it relates to independence director, Section 404, and a couple of other sections. Talk us through all of these contentions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much. And I said for company law, the law can say has been fair in terms of company law. But I always say that law is not governance, and corporate governance has its own purpose, which is different from law. So corporate governance is taking the frontier of good business beyond the realm of law. And so it's more into ethics. And so when you look at the code has not really done so well, has not favored corporate governance as a discipline. And I will highlight a few of them. So if you look at Section 275, it talks about, first of all, that there should be a minimum of 3 directors. Yeah. But the world has really moved on from naming categorically the number of directors you have. So the number of directors, from a leading practice, it should be relative to the number of persons on the board, because you're going to compose committees. So, for example, if you look at other jurisdictions, for example, if you look at South Africa, it tells you that more than half of the board should be non-executive directors. And he said that half, again, should comprise, more than half of that, of the non-executive directors, should be made up of independent directors. And so as you begin to increase the number of your directors, so also you are increasing the number of independent directors. And so if you're saying public companies, you have 3 independent directors. So what if you have a board of 15? So you're going to have just 3 directors. So it becomes complicated when you are forming your committees. And from a global perspective, there are certain committees that are supposed to be independent committees. We call them the 3 Musketeer committees. So your audit committee, your governance and nomination committee.
How does this actually tie in with the Section 404 that also asks for some equal numbers of audit committee members and, of course, the independent directors again?
Okay, so the challenge with Section 404 is that there is this relationship, what you call the principal and agent relationship. Right? And so the principal now, the shareholders, the expectation from a corporate governance balance is that the shareholders have now appointed agents, the management, right? And so the expectation is that you need to allow management to now manage the company, then you begin to demand for accountability in terms of how they affairs. But what you have in Nigeria, which was in section 359 of CAMA, is now the principal appointing equal numbers of members and directors, equal numbers to join directors as members of the audit committee. And so what they've done in this section 404 of the CAMA 2019 is to now make that now, even shareholders now will be 3, then directors will now have to be 2. They say non-executive director. The challenge you have there is blame apportionment. If an agent, if a principal has appointed an agent, and you are also now the one managing, so when you want to apportion blame, it means that if a company collapses today, it becomes a problem to say it's the management that is responsible because the shareholders have come in. And so, but if you look at it from a global perspective, if you look at Section 301 of Sarbanes-Oxley Act, it said all members of the audit committee must be members of the board. And they went further to say, and they must be all independent, right? Then we were talking about Section 275 that talked about the independent director, the criteria. If you look at the criteria that was given, to be very frank, it is like modern corporate governance on the streets. Why I say that is that if you look at existing codes in Nigeria, the Financial Reporting Code, which is the Nigeria Code of Corporate Governance 2018, the NCCG 2018, it mentioned that for you to be a director, one of the criteria that qualifies you is that you should not have more than 0.01% shares, right? If you look at Section 5, paragraph 5.5 of the SEC code, the current code of 2011 SEC, it's also said 0.01%. If you look at the Nigerian Communications Commission, it's also under section paragraph 3.2G, it also mentioned 0.01%. Only the PENCON code of 2008 that mentioned 5%. But if you look at CAMA, under section 275, it told us that it has to be 30%. The question is that how do you move from 0.01% to 30%? But look, we are not an island unto ourselves. We are a country and we are in a global village. And so, a former SEC, United States SEC chairman said that if you don't produce a strict corporate governance, capital will flow elsewhere.
So what do you think should be done now going forward? Should we review the CAMA again?
Yeah, so if you look at it, the National Assembly must understand that, one, corporate governance is not the same way that Adrian Cabri defined it in 1992, which is the system by which an organization is directed and controlled. Today, corporate governance have 2 purposes by a jurisdiction or a country. One is to ensure that the interest within a system to balance that interest that may conflict. So within an organization, a company, what are the interests that may conflict? Then 2 is to ensure that you are telling foreign investors that we have the right mechanisms in place. But if, as it is now today in Nigeria, if you look at what we can do, I would say that, one, the National Assembly need to look at specifically the corporate governance provisions. So, for example, if you look at Section 402, right? Section 402 talks about that now small companies would no longer be required to audit their accounts.
And let's tie that in with what it says about the company secretaries.
Yes, company secretary.
That amounts to some kind of job losses. Do you agree?
So definitely, because if you look at it...
But aren't there other opportunities under this new CAMA and these amendments for the company secretaries and, of course, auditors generally to actually leverage?
No, so not really. So I will tell you practically. So we must look at this thing from a practical perspective. So today, there are some accountants, some auditors, right, who their job is just to render services to smaller companies, right? And if you look at Nigeria, we have a Big 4 challenge where most of the big companies actually engage only Big 4. And so the other smaller auditors are now left with smaller. But I think what Nigeria can do, number one, is to ensure that, and which is the balancing, I say the interest, is to ensure that when we are making laws, not just CAMA, I can tell you, CAMA and the investment and security that alone can create more than 5 million jobs. And so government must look at how do we use our laws to create activity. So one, they need to ensure that instead of saying that there's no more audit, what they would have done is to, for example, if it is SEC or any other body, make it in such a way that you create make a provision that SEC will now create a guidelines to register smaller auditors and prescribe a particular threshold for them to audit smaller companies.
So should we take this CAMA law back to the National Assembly for some kind of
yeah, so a law is a document.
You need to give us a yes or no.
No, it's a yes.
Okay.
So you need to go back.
But not in the immediate term, right?
No,
because
immediate
this
term.
is actually still being digested.
No. So let me tell you, the world is moving on and we cannot wait. And so what the National Assembly needs to do is to say, these provisions, have they helped corporate governance?
Or not?
Yes, they need to look at it critically. And people like us, we are actually there to support and give necessary assistance for the country. So we have gone to the same...
We'll see how that pans out eventually. I'm sure the policymakers, regulators generally are watching, and of course they will have one or two things to take away from this conversation. The Chief Executive Officer of Lichting Consulting and Board Gov Limited, Dr. Maklesh Otwedon, thanks a great deal for joining us on
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor. And so
we do look forward to more engagement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up on the program is the first CMC meeting of the Securities and Exchange Commission this year under the new Director General, Dr. Lamido Yuguda. Join us after the short break.